Hi everyone, I'm Offeh and this is my workshop for Hospital Room's Digital Art School. So my workshop is based on a slightly old art technique called wax rubbings. Some of you might have experienced or have had a go at doing wax rubbings. Something that's maybe associated with sort of primary school activities. But actually, for me, it has a really kind of interesting history in relation to, I think, artists and architects using the technique to map and capture an idea or an impression of buildings or of places or of surfaces. And sort of 200-300 years ago, it was a technique that was used by people who were travelling often to kind of get a sort of souvenir of somewhere they'd been to. It's very simple, and I'll sort of take you through the materials, and hopefully you'll all give it a go and get some interesting results. Before we get started, I'm just going to take you through some of the materials that you'll need. First of all is a piece of paper. So here I've got just an A4 sheet of paper. You can use a bigger sheet of paper, A3, or you can put two pieces together if you want a slightly larger piece of paper. It's often quite good to have a bit more paper so you can take several rubbings onto one sheet. And then you'll need some wax crayons. These are just very ordinary wax crayons. You can choose whichever colours you want. All I would say is make sure you have a white wax crayon. We'll be doing a specific activity which uses a white crayon, so it's important you have at least one white. And then later on, you'll need some paint. This is just acrylic paint, but you can use water paint. Water-soluble paint is best. A brush and some water. So once you've got all that, the main thing you'll need is actually things to take a rubbing from. So it's a very simple process. You need objects or surfaces that have texture. So they might have a pattern or they might be raised. I've just kind of collected a few things just to give you an example, but it's really up to you. And I think that's, for me, is the really interesting thing, is how you decide what you choose to take a rubbing of. So I've just got some bark. And again, you often need things that are quite flat, but have a definite texture. I've got this bit of metal, which is like a sort of heat protector for surfaces. That's got a sort of quite decorative sort of pattern. So I'm hoping that will be quite good. I've got a shoe. So the sole, the underside of the shoe, just thinking about a kind of, again, has a really interesting kind of pattern, really interesting sort of tread. So you can be quite playful, quite inventive. You just need things that have a sort of texture and a surface and are quite firm. When I did the workshop for hospital rooms in Croydon, a sort of feature of the workshop was actually us kind of going around the ward and looking for different surfaces. So we found radiators by the sink. We went outside and just in the courtyard found some manhole covers and bricks. So yeah, if you have the opportunity to kind of sort of have a look around the ward, maybe have a look for some surfaces that you might be able to take rubbings from. And what you need to do, very simply, to get a rubbing is you'll take a piece of paper and your object, the thing that you're going to get the rubbing from, and just place the paper on top. And then take a crayon of your choice, and then hold the paper down, and then you'll just rub across the surface. We've got a rubbing based on this object. You get a transfer of kind of information, you get some of the kind of pattern that kind of comes through. So I've got my bit of bark. Let's see what happens with this. I'm just going to use another bit of the paper, maybe just here. This is a bit of an irregular shape, so don't worry if your paper's getting crumpled up, that's fine. That's very different to the first one, a sandal here. So I'm going to try and get a rubbing from that. I'm just going to hold that down and just rub across it. So what you can see is this kind of pattern. It's a bit like a kind of fish scale. Got another sheet of paper, and this time I'm going to try using the white crayon. It's a slightly different technique, which is wax resist, and I'll explain what I mean by that. I'm going to use my bit of heat resistant sort of bit of metal, and just lay the paper on top. And this time using a white wax crayon. Just rub over the surface. And again, I'm going to bring in some of my objects, my sandal. With the wax crayon, I've used those 3 different objects. So obviously it's white on white and you can't really see maybe so clearly, but what we're going to do is we're going to bring in the paint. So if you just water down your paint, and again it should be just water soluble, so it can be like powder paint or poster paint. Hopefully you'll have more colours than I have. Just use quite a bit of water so it's quite thin. And then, yeah, you just put the paint over where you've put your rubbing. And what you'll see is that with this wax resist, the paint won't go where you've rubbed the wax. So it'll go in the spaces in between. So it's kind of more apparent as it dries as well. So yeah, you can probably see that pattern kind of coming through. Maybe you can mix colours as well. I'm gonna try and use a bit of red. Actually, maybe it's going to be purple now, but anyway, that's also fine. So we've got a slight mix of colours there. It's quite exciting because you see the pattern kind of sort of emerge, and it will become a bit clearer once it's dry. While it's still wet, it's not always that clear. But it's another sort of technique, just using the white crayon. So lastly, I just wanted to show you another approach. So this is a white crayon wax rubbing that I did earlier and left to dry. And the thing is, you've got to leave it to dry before you can do the second part of what I'm going to show you. So I sort of painted it, obviously. I'm going to just introduce again my favourite bit of metalwork. I'm just going to do a rubbing with just this orange, but over where the background is painted. So there you've got the pattern emerging over the original white and a sort of coloured wash kind of background. Again, you could sort of try some other things. Gonna bring that shoe in again. This is another technique, and you just can keep going with different layers. Paint the background, do white wax resist, and also then do some kind of coloured wax rubbings on top in different combinations. And I think you can, for me, it's really about kind of getting these different kind of combinations and thinking about interesting mixes of things. But you can do interesting repeats and overlays. And also I think you can also tell stories. You could perhaps get objects that might begin to speak to each other in a particular way. For example, if you've got things from your wallet, it could be kind of coins and cards. So that could tell a little story about just things that you carry around with you every day. If you're doing things where you're getting rubbings from buildings or from different places in the ward, it could be a kind of way of mapping different rooms you kind of go into. Hopefully across the workshop you'll get some different interesting results, whether that's using the white crayon for a sort of wax resist, where you then paint over where you've rubbed with the white crayon to reveal the pattern or surface texture, and you've got this really nice sort of painterly sort of background as well. Or using different coloured crayons to get different combinations of rubbings. I mean, you can always use the same colour, you don't have to use a mix, but I quite like a sort of mix and a layer, and creating different kind of compositions. Or you can kind of combine the techniques. So again, maybe sort of starting with a kind of white wax resist with paint, and then using coloured crayons to do different rubbings on the top of that, so that you're getting a kind of combination of things. It's a really, hopefully, interesting way for you to kind of just record different surfaces, and it's a way of looking at objects and spaces in a slightly different way, and creating what can be some really kind of colourful and interesting kind of patterns and images. So have a go.